My name is Elena Mercer. I'm 33 years old. And until recently, I was engaged to a man I truly believed I would spend the rest of my life with. His name was Ethan. Even now, saying that out loud still feels strange, because when I picture him in my mind, I don't see the man who stood by and let his family humiliate my dead mother. I see the version of him I fell in love with, the one with the easy laugh, the one who reached for my hand under the table like it was instinct, the one who made me believe that maybe, after everything life had taken from me, I was still allowed to have something soft, something lasting, something safe. I met Ethan about 5 years ago through mutual friends at a backyard cookout. It was one of those sticky summer evenings where the air smelled like charcoal and citronella, and everybody was talking too loudly over music no one had picked on purpose. I remember standing near the cooler, holding a paper plate with a burger I wasn't hungry for, when he walked over and made some dumb joke about how the host had committed a crime against potato salad. I laughed harder than the joke deserved. He grinned. And just like that, it started. He was charming in a way that didn't feel rehearsed back then. Quick with a joke, warm without seeming fake. The kind of man who could make a crowded place feel smaller, more private, like somehow the conversation was happening in a room built just for the two of you. When he proposed a year ago, I said yes without hesitation. At the time, it felt like the obvious next step. The right man, the right moment, the right future. What I didn't fully understand then was that I wasn't just agreeing to marry Ethan. I was stepping into his family, and his family came with a spotlight permanently aimed at themselves. His parents, Richard and Diane, were the kind of people who could turn any room into a stage. Loud, opinionated, socially aggressive in a way that passed for charisma if you didn't look too closely. The kind of people who always had something to say about the food, the decor, the neighborhood, the people in it, and especially anyone they believed ranked below them. At first, I tried to tell myself that was just their personality. Some people were blunt. Some people were dramatic. Some people needed attention the way other people needed oxygen. But over time, I started to understand that with Richard and Diane, it went deeper than that. It was entitlement, the kind that seeped into everything, the kind that made them treat generosity like weakness and kindness like something to exploit. Before I tell you what happened the night everything fell apart, you need to understand my mother. Her name was Margaret, and she was the best person I have ever known. She died 2 years ago after a brutal 3-year battle with cancer. Even now, there are days when I still catch myself reaching for my phone because something happens, and my first thought is, I need to tell Mom. Then the silence hits all over again, fresh and cruel, like grief doesn't care how much time has passed. It only cares whether you're vulnerable enough for it to get in. My mother was the kind of woman people trusted without quite knowing why. She had this quiet steadiness about her. She never needed to dominate a room to change it. She would just step in, notice what needed doing, and do it. No speeches, no scorekeeping, no performance. If somebody was struggling, she helped. If somebody was ashamed, she found a way to make help feel dignified. If somebody was drowning, she never stood on the shore talking about what they should have done differently. She went in after them, and Ethan's family owed more to her than they ever deserved. When I first brought Ethan home and introduced him to my mom, things seemed fine. She liked him. She told me later that he made her laugh and that he seemed kind. She was always careful with her opinions, especially early on. She believed people deserved room to reveal themselves before you judged them too harshly. Ethan, for his part, was polite, attentive, respectful enough. But as the relationship got more serious, I started noticing little things. Not blowout fights, not obvious hostility, just comments, tiny cuts. Ethan would sometimes call my mom a little intense when she checked in too often. Diane would make these airy little remarks about how Margaret loved being involved in everything. Richard once laughed and called her the Queen of Rescue Missions. Always with a smile, always with plausible deniability. And every single time, something inside me tightened, because those people had no right to talk about her that way. Years ago, when Ethan's parents were on the verge of losing their restaurant, my mother co-signed a loan for them when nobody else would. Their finances were a mess. Vendors were breathing down their necks. The business was unstable and one bad month away from collapse. My mother sat with them for hours, going over numbers, helping them restructure, helping them build a plan that could actually keep the place alive. And it worked. The restaurant survived. Richard and Diane kept their livelihood. Later, when the industrial oven broke down and they didn't have the money to replace it, my mother paid for the new one out of pocket, not as a loan, not as leverage, just because she knew if they lost service for too long, the whole business could unravel. She never asked to be repaid. And the bitter truth is, there were years when she could have used that money herself, especially once the medical bills started piling up. But that was who she was. She saw a need, and if she could meet it, she did. It didn't stop with Ethan's parents. His older brother, Caleb, nearly dropped out of college because he couldn't afford his final semester. My mother quietly covered it, told him education was one of the few things nobody could take from him once he earned it. She helped with bookkeeping. She babysat Caleb's kids when his schedule got impossible. She gave her time the same way she gave money, without ceremony, without making anybody bow for it. And not once did that family ever truly honor what she had done. They said thank you in passing. They accepted. They benefited. But gratitude? Real gratitude? No, that would have required humility. When my mother died, I fell apart in ways I didn't let most people see. Grief is strange like that. Some of it is public. Some of it hides under your skin and makes a home there. I could still go to work, still answer emails, still smile when someone asked how I was doing. But inside, I felt like someone had taken a blade and cut the center out of my life. Ethan was there during those first awful months. At least that's what I told myself. Looking back now, I see something different. I see a man doing just enough not to be called cruel. He would hold me when I cried, but only briefly, like there was a time limit on how long my sadness was allowed to remain inconvenient. He'd say things like, "Your mom wouldn't want you stuck like this," or "You have to keep moving, Elena." And maybe, in some abstract way, those words were true. But they never felt comforting. They felt impatient. Like grief was a hallway he wanted me to hurry through because he was tired of standing in it with me. As the wedding got closer, the red flags became harder to ignore. I wanted to include a small tribute to my mother in the ceremony. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet acknowledgement during my vows. A sentence. A candle. Something that made room for the fact that one of the most important people in my life would not be there to see me walk down that aisle. Ethan barely looked up when I brought it up. "Wouldn't that make things kind of sad?" he asked. "Weddings are supposed to feel happy." I remember staring at him, waiting for some sign that he heard himself. But he just kept scrolling through seating options on his phone. I let it go. Not because it didn't matter. Because by then, I had already started doing what women do far too often when they love someone who keeps disappointing them in ways too small to justify a full collapse. I translated. I softened. I excused. Then there were the comments from Richard and Diane. The constant little reminders that, in their minds, Ethan was somehow doing me a favor by marrying me. Richard once joked at dinner that Ethan was elevating his future by choosing a woman who came from simpler roots. Diane liked saying things like, "Well, love always asks for compromise," in this tone that suggested I was the compromise. Every time it happened, Ethan either laughed awkwardly or said nothing at all. And every time he said nothing, something between us thinned. I should have listened to that feeling. I should have understood that silence is not neutral when someone is humiliating the person you claim to love. But I kept telling myself the same lie. After the wedding, things will calm down. After the wedding, we'll have our own life. After the wedding, it will just be us. I didn't know yet that the rehearsal dinner would rip that illusion apart so completely there would be nothing left to save. About a month before the wedding, Ethan's parents offered to host the rehearsal dinner at a high-end restaurant they had connections with. At first, I thought it was a peace offering, a gesture, maybe even an attempt to smooth over months of tension and subtle cruelty. I should have known better, because Diane didn't present it like a gift. She presented it like a performance. She kept bringing it up in conversation with this bright, boastful smile, talking about how much effort they were putting in, how unforgettable the evening would be, how people would be talking about it for weeks. Richard was worse. He made a point of reminding me how exclusive the place was, how lucky we were they could secure it, how not everyone had access to this kind of venue. As if I was supposed to feel indebted. As if I was supposed to stand there grateful that they had chosen to decorate my humiliation with chandeliers. And still, I swallowed my discomfort. Still, I told myself to get through it. Still, I thought maybe I could make it to the wedding if I just endured a little more. I had no idea that dinner would become the moment I finally saw all of them clearly, including the man I was about to marry. The night of the rehearsal dinner felt wrong before we even got there. Ethan and I drove in silence for most of the way. I tried at first to make conversation. Small things. Safe things. "Are you excited?" I asked, glancing over at him as the city lights blurred past the window. He didn't look up from his phone. "It's just a dinner, Elena. Don't overthink it." Just a dinner. That was his answer for everything lately. I turned back to the window, pressing my lips together as something tight and familiar settled in my chest. By the time we pulled up to the restaurant, the tension had already found a home between us. The place was exactly what Richard had promised. Elegant in that very deliberate, almost aggressive way. White tablecloths so crisp they looked untouched, chandeliers dripping soft golden light from the ceiling. Waitstaff moving with quiet precision, like the entire room had been rehearsed down to the smallest detail. It didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like a performance. And the moment we stepped inside, I knew who the stars were. Richard stood near the entrance, greeting guests like he was hosting a corporate gala instead of his son's rehearsal dinner. Firm handshakes, loud laughter, a little too much presence in every interaction. Diane floated behind him, directing staff, adjusting details, making sure everything looked exactly the way she wanted it to. Ethan barely slowed down as we walked in. "They've been here for hours," he muttered, like that explained everything. It didn't, because what I noticed next made something colder settle in my stomach. The guest list, or more specifically, who wasn't on it. I scanned the room slowly. My father, my sister, a couple of close friends. That was it. Everyone else, every other seat at those perfectly arranged tables, was filled with Ethan's family or his parents' business connections. People I barely knew. People who barely acknowledged me. People who were already laughing at jokes I hadn't heard yet. I felt it then. That quiet, creeping realization. This wasn't our dinner. It never had been. I leaned closer to Ethan, keeping my voice low. "Where is everyone?" I asked. "Why aren't more of my family here?" He sighed like I'd just asked him something unreasonable. "Elena, your family's small. My parents had to fill the room somehow. It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. I stared at him for a second longer than I should have. Then I nodded. Because what else was I supposed to do? 'Cause a scene at the door? Turn around and leave? I wasn't there yet. So I smiled, and I played my part. Dinner itself was flawless, at least if you were judging it by appearances. The food was expensive. The presentation was meticulous. Every course arrived on time. Every glass stayed full. Diane made a point of narrating the entire experience like we were all lucky to be included. "We worked with the chef to curate something truly special," she said, her voice carrying just enough to make sure everyone at the table heard. "Nothing like what you'd normally have back home, Elena." Back home. That was her favorite phrase. A polite way of reminding me that I didn't belong in rooms like this. I smiled anyway. "Looks beautiful," I said, because I had spent months learning how to swallow things that should have been said out loud. Across the table, Richard leaned back in his chair, swirling his drink. "You've got to admit," he added, "this is a step up." A few people laughed. Soft. Polite. Just enough to let him know he'd landed the line. I felt my fingers tighten around my fork. Ethan chuckled under his breath. Didn't correct him. Didn't even glance at me. And something inside me shifted. Just a little. But enough. The rest of dinner passed in that same rhythm. Conversation that excluded me. Jokes that landed just a little too close. Comments that sounded harmless until you sat with them long enough to realize they weren't. And every time I looked at Ethan, hoping, just once, that he would step in, he didn't. He stayed exactly where he was. Comfortable. Neutral. Safe. By the time the plates were cleared, I felt like I had been slowly erased from my own life. And then the speeches started. Richard stood first. Of course he did. He walked to the front of the room like he belonged there, like this was his moment, not ours. He took the microphone, tapped it lightly, and smiled out at the crowd. "Welcome, everyone," he began. "Tonight is about celebrating the union of two families, our Ethan, and of course, Elena." He said my name like it was an afterthought, like it didn't quite belong in the sentence. I sat up straighter anyway, tried to keep my expression neutral. But then he kept going, talking about Ethan, his achievements, his drive, his standards, praising him in ways that felt less like love and more like branding. And now, he said, pausing just long enough to let the room settle, he's found someone who will keep him grounded. There was a smirk there, subtle, but unmistakable. A few people chuckled. I didn't. My father didn't. My sister didn't. But that didn't matter, because Richard was enjoying himself too much to notice. He told a story about Ethan as a kid, about ambition, about expectations, about always aiming higher. And while Elena might not have been exactly what we pictured at first, he let the sentence trail off, left it hanging, like the silence itself was the punchline. This time more people laughed. Louder, because now they understood the tone. Now they knew what kind of night this was going to be. I felt something hot crawl up my neck, but I stayed still, because somewhere, deep down, I was still hoping that maybe Diane would be different. She wasn't. She took the mic next with a bright smile and a posture that screamed performance. At first, it sounded better. She talked about Ethan growing up, about how proud she was, about how exciting it was to see him settle down. But then the shift came. Small, precise, deadly. Elena, she said, turning toward me with that same sweet expression, has been such an interesting addition to our lives. Interesting. Not kind. Not wonderful. Not loved. Interesting. She's brought a different perspective, Diane continued, and it's been lovely watching Ethan learn so much. A few more laughs. Quieter this time, but sharper. I could feel them. Ethan smiled. Actually smiled, and something inside my chest cracked. We're just so happy, Diane added, to welcome you into the family. It'll be nice to have someone who doesn't mind getting their hands a little dirty, right? More laughter. I glanced around the table, saw people looking down, saw a few uncomfortable expressions, but not enough. Not nearly enough, because no one stopped her. No one said anything. Not even him. I looked at Ethan again, waiting, begging without words. But he just shook his head slightly, like I was the one making it awkward by reacting at all. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Richard stood up again. One last thing, he said, lifting his glass. Before we wrap up, I felt my stomach drop, because something in his tone had changed. This is someone who can't be here tonight, he continued, but who played a role in shaping Elena into the woman she is. My heart stopped. My mother. For a split second, just a fraction of a second, I thought maybe he was going to say something kind, something respectful, something real. But then he smiled, and I knew. Margaret, he said, raising his glass, was one of a kind. There was laughter in his voice, not warmth, not reverence. She had a habit of inserting herself into situations, didn't she? He went on. Always had an opinion about how things should be done. A ripple of laughter spread across the room. Diane leaned forward, chiming in. Oh, she definitely liked to get involved, she said lightly. Remember how she was always helping, even when no one asked? More laughter. My hands went cold. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe properly. Because they weren't just talking about her. They were rewriting her, turning her into something smaller, something inconvenient, something easy to laugh at. Richard took another sip of his drink, clearly pleased. But in all seriousness, he added, she was generous, helped us out quite a bit. He paused, smirked. Sometimes a little too much, if I'm being honest. He winked, like it was a joke we were all supposed to share. Like my mother's kindness was something excessive, something embarrassing, something laughable. The room didn't know what to do. Some people shifted. Some looked down. Some forced polite smiles. But no one stopped him. And when I turned to Ethan, he laughed, soft, uncomfortable, but real. And that was the moment everything inside me went still. Because I understood something with a clarity so sharp it almost felt calm. This wasn't going to get better. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't nerves or stress or bad timing. This was who they were. And this, the man sitting next to me, smiling through it, this was who he was. And I had almost married him. The silence after Richard's last joke didn't feel awkward. It felt heavy, like the room itself knew something had gone too far. For a few seconds, no one moved. No forks. No glasses. No polite laughter to smooth it over. Just that thick, suffocating quiet. And then Ethan leaned slightly toward me. Are you okay? He whispered. His voice was soft, casual, like he was asking if I wanted more water. Not like his parents had just stood up in front of a room full of people and turned my mother's life into a punchline. I didn't answer him, because something inside me had already snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just cleanly, like a thread that had been pulled too tight for too long and finally gave way. Diane stepped closer to the table, smiling that same polished, practiced smile. Elena, she said sweetly, I hope you didn't take that the wrong way. We were just trying to add a little humor to the evening. That's when I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. Every head turned. And suddenly, all that quiet attention that had been hovering at the edges of the night snapped directly onto me. Are you serious right now? My voice didn't shake the way I expected it to. If anything, it came out too steady, too controlled, which made it land even harder. Diane blinked. Just once, like she hadn't quite prepared for this version of me. Richard set his glass down slowly, his expression shifting from amusement to mild annoyance. Elena, Ethan started, reaching for my arm. I pulled it away. No, not this time. Let me get this straight, I said, louder now, turning just enough so the entire table and most of the room could hear me. You spent the entire night taking little digs at me, and then you decided to end it by mocking my mother. And now you're telling me it was just a joke? Richard leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. You're overreacting, he said, that same smug tone curling at the edges of his words. It was all in good fun. Good fun. I felt something sharp rise in my chest. Good fun, I repeated. You called her intrusive. You laughed about her helping you. You made it sound like her generosity was a flaw. A few people shifted in their seats. The air in the room tightened. Diane let out a light, dismissive laugh. Oh, Elena, don't be so sensitive. We were just sharing stories. Everyone knows how your mother liked to take charge. Take charge. I actually let out a short, disbelieving breath. Take charge? I echoed. She saved your business. That landed. Harder. Because now people were listening. Really listening. She co-signed your loan when no one else would, I continued, my voice steady but rising. She paid for your industrial oven when it broke down so you wouldn't lose customers. She spent hours helping you fix your finances. She covered Caleb's tuition so he could graduate. Now the room was completely silent. No shifting. No whispering. Nothing. She didn't do any of that for attention, I said. She did it because she cared. Because that's who she was. And you're standing here, years later, turning that into something to laugh about? Richard sat up straighter now. His jaw tightened. All right, that's enough, he said sharply. We didn't mean anything by it, but if you're going to make a scene... A scene? I cut in. The word came out sharper than anything I'd said so far. I'm making a scene? I repeated. You humiliated my mother in front of a room full of people, and I'm the problem? Elena, please, Ethan said, his voice low, urgent now. Can we just go outside and talk about this? I turned to him slowly, and for the first time that night, for the first time in a long time, I really looked at him. Not the man I thought I loved. Not the version of him I had built in my head. The real one. You laughed, I said quietly. He froze. What? He asked. You laughed, I repeated. Every time they said something about her, you laughed. You didn't say a word. You didn't stop them. You didn't even try. I didn't know what to do, he said quickly. I didn't think they were going to... But they did, I cut him off. And you sat there and let it happen. His mouth opened. Closed. No answer. Of course not. Because there wasn't one. Diane let out a dramatic sigh. This is supposed to be a happy occasion, she said, shaking her head. You're ruining the evening for everyone. I actually laughed at that. A short, hollow sound. I'm ruining it, I said. No. You ruined it the second you decided my mother's life was something you could turn into entertainment. A murmur rippled through the room. People shifting, whispering, watching. Richard stood up now, his patience clearly gone. If you're so offended, he said coldly, maybe you should leave. For a moment, just a moment, I considered it. Walking out. Letting them keep their perfect little dinner. Letting them rewrite the story however they wanted. But then I looked across the room. At my father. At my sister. At the few people who had shown up for me. And I realized something. If I walked away quietly, they would turn this into my failure. My overreaction. My weakness. Number. Not this time. I'm not leaving, I said. The words landed flat. Final. Richard's eyebrows lifted slightly, like he hadn't expected that. Not until you understand what you've done. You're being dramatic, he snapped. No, I said. I'm being clear. I took a breath. Steady. Grounded. You don't get to rewrite who my mother was just because it makes you more comfortable, I continued. She deserved better than that. And honestly, I looked directly at Ethan. So do I. That was it. That was the moment. I felt it. The shift. The point of no return. I stepped back from the table, reached for my coat. My hands were steady now. Strangely steady. Like once the decision was made, my body had finally caught up with my mind. Elena, wait, Ethan started, standing up quickly. I didn't stop. Didn't look back. I walked toward the door, every step echoing louder than the last in the stunned silence behind me. Outside, the cool night air hit my face like a reset. My father followed almost immediately, his hand landing gently on my shoulder. You did the right thing, he said quietly. My sister came next, her expression tight with anger. They're unbelievable, she muttered. I nodded. But I didn't feel relieved. Not yet. Because something inside me was still unsettled. Still unfinished. I stared back at the restaurant, at the glowing windows, at the people inside already starting to move again, to talk, to recover. And I knew exactly what was about to happen. They would twist it. They would say I was too sensitive, that I couldn't take a joke, that I overreacted, that I embarrassed them. And somehow, I would become the problem. No, I said under my breath. My sister frowned. What? I shook my head. I'm not leaving it like this. Elena, you don't owe them anything, she said quickly. I know, I replied. And that's exactly why I'm going back. My father hesitated, studied my face, then gave a small understanding nod. Do what you need to do. I took a deep breath, then turned, and walked back inside. The moment I stepped through the doors, the room shifted again. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Whispers died mid-sentence. Ethan was still standing near the table, his face pale, his eyes wide when he saw me. Elena, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer. I walked past him, straight to the front of the room, where Richard and Diane were still seated, still trying to hold on to whatever control they thought they had. I turned to face everyone, all of them, every person who had watched, every person who had laughed, every person who had stayed silent. "Excuse me," I said. My voice carried easily, clear, steady. The room went completely still. "I have something I need to say." I felt my heart pounding in my chest, but my hands didn't shake. Not anymore. I glanced once at Ethan, then back to the room. "I know this isn't how anyone expected tonight to go," I continued, "but after what just happened, I don't see any reason to wait." A pause, one breath. And then, "This wedding is off." The words hit like glass shattering. Gasps, chairs scraping, voices rising in shock. "Elena, no!" Ethan said, stepping forward, panic flashing across his face. I raised a hand, stopping him. "This isn't just about tonight," I said. "This is about the kind of family I would be marrying into. A family that doesn't respect me, doesn't respect my mother, and doesn't respect the values I was raised with." Richard scoffed. "You're making a mistake," he said. "You're throwing everything away over nothing." I let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "Nothing?" I repeated. "If that's what you think this is, then you've just proven my point." Diane stepped forward, her expression tight. "We can talk about this tomorrow," she said quickly, "when everyone's had time to calm down." "No," I said. Firm, final. "There is no tomorrow for this." I turned to Ethan one last time. He looked broken, confused, like the reality hadn't fully reached him yet. But I wasn't confused anymore. "I deserve better than this," I said quietly. And then I walked away. This time, for good. The next morning didn't feel real. It felt loud, not physically, but inside my head. Like everything that had happened the night before was still echoing, bouncing around without anywhere to land. I woke up to my phone vibrating nonstop on the nightstand. When I finally picked it up, the screen lit up with notifications. Messages, missed calls, voicemails. I stared at it for a second before unlocking it. And then I saw the number. 87 unread messages. Most of them from Ethan. The rest from his parents. A few from relatives whose names I barely recognized. Even before opening them, I already knew what they would say. But I opened them anyway. Ethan's messages came first. "Elena, please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of that to happen. I didn't know they were going to say those things. Please just talk to me. We can fix this." Fix this. I stared at those words longer than the rest. Because that was the problem, wasn't it? He still thought this was something temporary. Something accidental. Something that could be smoothed over with the right combination of apologies and promises. Then came the messages from Richard. Short, sharp, angry. "You embarrassed us. In front of everyone. You'll regret this." And Diane's, exactly what I expected. Soft words wrapped around blame. "I can't believe you would do this to Ethan. He didn't deserve to be treated like that. You took what should have been a beautiful evening and destroyed it." I let out a slow breath. Then I locked my phone. Not because I didn't have a response, but because none of them deserved one. Not anymore. By mid-afternoon, I heard the knock. I didn't even have to check the door. I knew it was him. I stood there for a second, hand resting on the handle, feeling that familiar pull. The part of me that remembered everything before the cracks. The part that still wanted to believe there was something worth saving. And then, I opened the door. Ethan stood there like he hadn't slept. His eyes were red. His hair was a mess. He was still wearing the same shirt from the night before. "Elena," he said softly. His voice broke on my name. "Can we talk?" I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "What's there to talk about?" He flinched, just slightly. "I know you're angry," he said quickly, "and you have every right to be, but we can fix this. We can talk to my parents. I'll make them apologize. This isn't about your parents," I cut in. He stopped, blinking, confused. "It's not?" he asked. "No," I said. "It's about you." That landed harder than anything else I'd said so far. Because for the first time since he arrived, he didn't have a script. "You sat there," I continued, my voice calm, almost too calm, "and let them tear my mother apart, and you didn't say a word." "I didn't know how to handle it," he said, his voice rising slightly. "I didn't want to make things worse." "You didn't want to make things uncomfortable," I corrected. Silence. Thick. Heavy. He swallowed. "I was trying to keep the peace," he said. I nodded slowly. "I know." And that was the problem. Because keeping the peace, to him, had always meant sacrificing me. "I was scared, okay?" he added suddenly, his voice cracking. "I didn't want everything to blow up like that." "Scared of what?" I asked. He hesitated. And in that hesitation, I got my answer. "Scared of them," I said quietly. He didn't deny it. "And that's exactly why I can't marry you," I added. His face fell, like the words physically hit him. "Elena, please," he said, stepping closer. "Don't do this. We've built something together. We can work through it. I'll change, I promise." I studied him for a long moment, really studied him, and I realized something that felt both devastating and freeing at the same time. He believed what he was saying. He believed promises were enough. That intention could rewrite reality, but I had already lived the reality over and over again. I can't unsee what I saw last night, I said quietly, and I'm not going to spend the rest of my life hoping you'll become someone you've never been. His eyes filled with tears. Elena, I deserve someone who doesn't hesitate to stand up for me, I continued, not someone who needs a quiet moment afterward to figure out if he should have. He stood there, breaking, and for the first time since I met him, I didn't feel responsible for putting him back together. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it, just not in the way he wanted. He stayed there for another minute, like maybe if he didn't move, the conversation wouldn't end. But eventually, he stepped back and walked away. I closed the door. And for the first time since the night before, I felt something close to stillness. Not peace. Not yet, but something quieter than the chaos. Days passed. I blocked his number, deleted the messages, removed every easy way he could reach me. I started sorting through things, not just physical things, but emotional ones, memories, moments, pieces of a life I had been ready to build. And then, about a week later, I found the box, my mother's keepsake box. It had been sitting exactly where I always kept it, top shelf of my closet, tucked behind a stack of old photo albums. I hadn't opened it in a while, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew what it would do to me when I did. That quiet kind of grief, the kind that doesn't scream, just settles in your chest and stays there. I sat on the floor and pulled it down carefully, opened it slowly. Inside were all the things I remembered. Her necklace, the earrings she used to wear on Sundays, a few folded letters, and my breath caught. The locket, or rather, where it should have been. I froze, my hands hovering over the box as my mind tried to catch up. No. I started digging through it, carefully at first, then faster, then desperately. I checked every corner, every fold, every layer. Nothing. The locket was gone. My heart started pounding, because that wasn't just jewelry. That was history. It had been passed down through generations, mother to daughter. And before she died, my mom had given it to me. One day, she told me, smiling softly, "You'll know who it belongs to next." I hadn't even figured out what that meant yet. And now, it was gone. I sat there, staring at the empty space, as a cold realization started forming. Who had been in my apartment? Recently, alone. The answer came too quickly, too clearly. Ethan. He had come by a few days after the breakup to return the ring. He'd asked to use this bathroom before he left. I hadn't thought anything of it, until now. My stomach twisted. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking as I typed. "Did you take the locket from my mom's keepsake box?" The reply didn't come immediately, which somehow made it worse. When it finally did, my chest tightened. "What are you talking about?" I stared at the message, then typed again. Slower this time, more deliberate. "The locket, the one my mom left me, it's gone. You were the only one here. Did you take it?" A pause, longer this time. Then, "I borrowed it." Borrowed. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Borrowed?" I typed back. "Why would you take it without asking me?" The reply came quickly now. "I just wanted to feel close to you, to her. I thought it would help." I actually laughed. A short, disbelieving sound. "Help?" I didn't text back. I called him. He answered on the second ring. "Elena." "Where is it?" I cut in. My voice was sharp now. No softness left. "It's safe," he said quickly. "I didn't want anything to happen to it, so I left it at my parents' house." My grip tightened on the phone. "You took something that doesn't belong to you," I said slowly. "Something that means more to me than anything I own. And you left it at your parents' house?" "I was going to give it back," he said defensively. "You're overreacting." "Overreacting?" I repeated. My voice dropped. Colder now. Controlled. "No," I said. "I'm coming to get it." And this time, there was no hesitation. The drive to his parents' house felt longer than it actually was. Not because of traffic, because of what was sitting in my chest. Anger, yes, but not the explosive kind from the night of the dinner. This was colder, sharper, the kind that settles into your bones and doesn't rush, the kind that knows exactly where it's going. By the time I pulled into their driveway, I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't second-guessing. I wasn't hoping for anything. I was done. I walked up to the door and knocked once. Firm, measured. A few seconds later, Diane opened it. The moment she saw me, her expression flickered. Surprise. Then calculation. "Elena," she said slowly, "what are you doing here?" "I'm here for my mother's locket," I replied. No greeting. No small talk. No space for anything else. Her lips pressed together. "Ethan told you about that?" she asked, her tone already shifting into something defensive. "I'm not here to discuss it," I said. "I'm here to take it back." She hesitated. just long enough to make it obvious she was thinking about how to handle this. Then she stepped aside. "Fine," she said. "Come in." The house looked exactly the same. Perfect. Polished. Every surface in place. Like nothing messy was ever allowed to exist there. Not grief. Not accountability. Not truth. I stood in the foyer, not bothering to sit, not bothering to pretend this was anything other than what it was. A retrieval. A correction. Footsteps echoed from the stairs. Then Ethan appeared. He looked just as bad as he had the last time I saw him. Maybe worse. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a second, just a second, I saw something like hope flicker there. "Elena," he said softly. I didn't respond. Because we were past that. He stopped a few feet away, holding something in his hand. The locket. My breath caught. Not because I doubted it was there, but because seeing something that belonged to my mother in his hand, felt wrong in a way I couldn't fully put into words. Like he had crossed a line so deeply personal that no apology could ever reach it. "Here," he said, holding it out. I stepped forward and took it from him immediately. No hesitation. No thank you. My fingers closed around it, instinctively, protectively. I looked down, checked it carefully. The small, delicate chain, the worn edges. The tiny clasp my mother used to fidget with when she was thinking. It was the same, untouched. But it didn't matter, because something about it still felt violated. Like even being taken, being handled like that, had changed something. I closed my hand around it and slipped it into my pocket. Then I looked back up at him. "You had no right," I said. My voice was quiet, but it landed harder than anything I had said the night of the dinner. "I know," he said quickly. I wasn't thinking." "No," I cut in. "You were." He blinked, confused. "What?" he asked. "You were thinking," I said. "You just didn't think it mattered." Silence, because that was the truth. And we both knew it. "I wanted to feel close to you," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I thought if I had something of hers—" "You don't get to do that," I said. Each word precise, controlled. "You don't get to take something that belongs to my family, something she trusted me with, and decide it belongs to you too." "I wasn't trying to—" "You were trying to fix something you broke," I said. He stopped. Because again, it landed. "And that's the problem," I continued. "You keep thinking you can fix things after the fact, that you can apologize, explain, promise, and it'll make it okay." His eyes filled with tears. "I'm trying," he said. "I know," I replied. And for the first time since I walked in, there was no anger in my voice, just something final. "But it's too late." Diane shifted uncomfortably behind him. "This is getting a little dramatic," she muttered. "It's just a piece of jewelry." I turned my head slowly and looked at her, really looked at her. "No," I said. "It's not." She held my gaze for a second, then looked away, because even she knew. There was nothing she could say that wouldn't make it worse. I turned back to Ethan. "This is the last time I'm coming here," I said. He took a step forward. "Elena, please." "No," I said. Not louder, not harsher. Just absolute. "There is no version of this where we fix it," I continued. "There's no version where I forget what happened, or who you were when it mattered." His shoulders dropped, like something inside him had finally given up. "I loved you," he said quietly. I nodded. "I know." And I had. That was the hardest part. Not the anger, not the betrayal, but the fact that it had all been real to me. Every moment, every plan, every version of the future I had built in my head. "I loved you too," I added. His head lifted slightly. Hope again. Fragile. Desperate. And then I ended it. "But that doesn't change what you did." The hope disappeared. Just like that. I didn't say anything else, because there was nothing left to say. I turned, walked toward the door. And this time, no one followed me. No one tried to stop me. No one called my name. The air outside felt different. Lighter. Not because the pain was gone, but because it was no longer tangled. No longer confused. It had a shape now. A reason. A boundary. I got into my car and sat there for a moment, my hand resting over the pocket where the locket was. I could feel it through the fabric. Solid. Real. Still mine. I took a deep breath. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something settle inside me. Not relief. Not happiness. But something just as important. Certainty. I had lost a wedding. Lost a relationship. Lost the version of my life I thought I was stepping into. But I hadn't lost myself. And I hadn't lost her. My mother's voice. Her values. Her strength. They were still here. Still mine. And this time, I had chosen them over everything else.